Well, welcome all, and thanks for joining us as we spotlight Holy Cross alumni who have answered the call to become members of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. I'm Father Keith Maskowitz, Assistant Chaplain for Liturgy and Chaplain for the first year class of 2024. Today, I'm joined by my Provincial Superior, the Very Reverend Joseph O'Keefe, an alumnus of the Holy Cross class of 1976, and a former trustee of the college. And of course, we're taking advantage of Zoom to come to you today. Last summer, Father O'Keefe began his term as Provincial of the new USA East Coast Province, the largest province in the Jesuit Conference of Canada and the United States. It extends pretty much along the entire East Coast. As Provincial, Joe is responsible for the formation and care of roughly 600 Jesuit priests and brothers throughout the province, of which Holy Cross and the Jesuit community here is, of course, under his care. Joe is a teacher at heart, a nationally recognized authority on Catholic education, and prior to his role, taught at Fordham, Georgetown, and Boston College. He spent 25 years at BC, serving as the Dean of the Lynch School of Education. And despite his BC connections, we're confident that he has Holy Cross purple in his veins. Joe holds a doctorate in education from Harvard University, as well as graduate degrees from Fordham and the Weston School of Theology. Joe, thanks for being with us today. Happy Easter.
Thank you, Keith. Happy Easter to you too.
Good to see you. Good
to see you also.
Joe, I thought we might start talking a little bit about your tenure as Provincial, which has completely been during the pandemic. I've met with you several times now, always in that office, in that space. I know you haven't been able to travel. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of trying to be a leader in pandemic? Where's your energy gone?
Sure. Well, it's 8 months in now, just over 8 months, which is hard to believe. Of course, I don't know what it's like to be provincial when there's not a pandemic. So, but I very much look forward to finding out. The visitation and talking to every Jesuit about where he is in his life and his mission is much better done face to face, of course, and also to be able to travel from community to community, to be able to celebrate Mass and the casual conversations that happen. So we do the best we can. So I have now heard what we call the Account of Conscience, which is the annual conference between a Jesuit and the Provincial. I think I'm now up to like 380. And for each one, I've been sitting in this chair looking at this screen. So, but given the fact that so many of us are fully vaccinated, myself included, so my next visitation is at Fordham, and I will be able to do that in person. And then I'll be able to go to BC High, Campion, and Gloucester. So I haven't been back to Massachusetts for 16, 18 months. So.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm glad to hear you'll be able to actually travel. That's good.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Now, you said you're going up to Gloucester, and that's close to where you grew up. You're from Salem, Massachusetts, if memory serves?
Yes, the city of witches, yes. Born and raised, indeed.
And if memory serves, is there a connection with Joanne Pierce there somehow?
Oh, sure, of course, because my high school, St. John's Prep, was all boys. It was a small girls' Catholic school that closed, and by exception, they took transfers in juniors and seniors, and it's an all-girls school. So St. John's Prep, out of I don't know how many alums there are, but only 70 are women, because for 3 years there were women, and then they decided to go back to being all boys. So Joanne is part of a very select cohort.
Oh,
we've been friends over the years. So
yeah, I never knew the story. I knew there was some sort of connection. Yeah. That's great. How did Holy Cross get on your radar? Did your family go here? How did you decide?
Okay, so on my dad's side, it was one of these Boston Irish families where it was either BC or Holy Cross. And so my grandfather is class of 16 at Holy Cross. And when he was at Holy Cross, friends that he made who were brothers to my grandmother, and that's how they met. So class of 16, my grandfather, class of 51, my Uncle Ed. My dad and my Uncle Bob were both BC. And so I initially thought, you know what, I'm gonna break out and go someplace totally different. And I remember clearly, I've been thinking about this. It was one day when a classmate of mine, John Toomey at St. John's, said, you know, we can get a day off school if we go visit a college. And I had my father's car. I said, great, let's do it. Where? He said, Holy Cross. I said, well, all right, I'll go just for, it'd be fun to have a day off. Well, I fell in love with the place. Jim Halpin was the admissions director at that time, interviewed with him, sat in on a class, met terrific people. And I came home and at dinner with my family, I said, so I made up my mind, I'm going to Holy Cross. They're like, what? Where did this come from? You know? And it wasn't because of the family, it was because of my experience. And any number of people, these college visits become very important.
Yes.
In hindsight, of course, it was kind of my vocation story, right? If it had been a bad day or if I had a bad experience, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So that's how I got to Holy Cross.
Yeah, I often think about when students are taking tours, high school students, when it's raining. I wonder what that means, you know?
Right. Well, or when it's whistering, as we used to say, sort of sleet and cold and gray, you know. And then, of course, I was ordained at Holy Cross, and my first Mass was at Holy Cross. So there were deep, deep, deep roots on Mount St. James for me.
You know, I pulled out for Good Friday these red vestments, and I had this memory that we used to ordain men in red. I think.
No, I don't know why, but yeah, in fact, yes. Red Spencer vestments, indeed.
We're still using them. They're in good shape too.
Good.
Now, speaking back to your high school, that was like kind of accidentally coeducational. Here at Holy Cross, you were kind of starting just as it was going co-ed.
Yeah, well, yeah, in fact, my class is the first fully co-ed class.
Okay.
There were some women in the class of 74, 75 who transferred in to be RAs and things like that, but it was a very small group. But really my class, the extraordinary women in my class, in the class of 76, you know, and typical of Holy Cross, I mean, one of the advantages, I suppose, of the pandemic and Zoom, every other Friday, a bunch of us get together by Zoom. And of course, we look forward to being together on the Cape in person this summer. But the closeness of friendships from Holy Cross is amazing. And I think a lot of people have that experience. It's a place that bonds people together.
Yes. And
lifelong friendships, you know.
I somehow got onto a list for like a class letters. So the class letters that get put together, and the warmness and I don't know, there's a lot of funny stories, and it feels very small, like small communities. And it amazes me in a way, because it's not familiar to me, you know?
Yeah.
That's funny. You alluded to your vocation story before. I wonder if you might tell us, like, when did you feel a calling to the priesthood? And why the Jesuits? Why not the Zavarian brothers? Why not somebody else?
Well, I think it was a call to priesthood. I mean, I think in many ways how, and again, with hindsight, you look back and you see that these seemingly random experiences, but you can see how they kind of fit together. I started early on working as an orderly in the hospital. I started my senior year in high school, and every vacation would go back. And of course, those days you could lump together, you know, summer work, alone, work study, and actually pay for your tuition, which is not the case nowadays. And so working in a hospital at a young age, starting when I was 17 years old, I mean, I saw a lot of, you know, emergency rooms and things like that. So it made me reflect on kind of the meaning of life. And there were a number of diocesan priests that really, both in the hospital context, but then also in the parish, they were just really great guys. And so I really considered being a diocesan priest in the Boston Archdiocese. And I still have great fondness for the Boston Archdiocese. But it was at Holy Cross where, you know, people like Bob Manning and Paul Harmon, Bob McMillan, John Paris, there was something about the way they understood faith, the kind of a respect for asking good questions, not being afraid of questions, kind of being learned. And, you know, the experience of men who really were brothers and shared their life together and seemed happy and to really like each other. And so that brotherhood piece of it, which, and there's some of that in diocesan priesthood, but I mean, it's much more individual life. And And as I've come to understand, in August, I will be 45 years in the society, that Jesuit life and my own personality, what makes me happy, what gives me joy, it's a fit. And so, yeah, I think it was the example of living Jesuits.
Yeah. The shortest version of my vocational story I often say is I joined the Jesuits because I knew happy Jesuits.
Yep, yeah, that's true.
It's the shortest version, but it's also the truest.
Right.
You're not teaching anymore, not
No,
officially,
sadly, I know.
but teaching and mentoring people. You've been doing this for many, many years.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about kind of your history of teaching, your career of teaching, and what does it mean now to have stepped back from that?
Well, I mean, it started when I was a novice. And I was initially a French major at Holy Cross. I then switched to philosophy, and then said, well, the reason I wanted to be a French major is because a guy by the name of Marty Beekman, one of the best teachers I ever had at St. John's Prep, a French teacher, was a Holy Cross alum. There you go. So I started in the novitiate, and my long experiment was at Bishop Conley High School in Fall River. And I just fell in love with it. I loved high school teaching. I was mentioning there's now a novice here in New York at Regis High School doing the same thing, a Holy Cross alum, and he's just loving the teaching part of it. And then came to Fordham, was actually getting a master's in French, where I also was teaching assistant. So did some of that. And then I went to Chevres High School for 3 years, full-time teaching. And I loved it. I was fascinated by schools. I was fascinated by the culture of schools, and the transmission of values and that. So when I was completing my theology studies, the question was, what do I do? And initially the thought was that I would do high school administration. So got permission and went into the doctoral program at Harvard. And while there, I fell in love with, I was a teaching fellow, and I was doing writing and research, and I fell in love with that whole aspect of it. So I didn't go there with the intention of becoming a university professor, but in effect, that's what evolved. And BC and Fordham both offered me full-time faculty positions. I remember I said to Bob Manning, 6 and 1, half dozen the other, advantages to each. And he said, you're going to BC, where I was for 25 years. And then when I became rector at Chiswick Hall of the Scholastics, I then joined the faculty at Fordham. So go figure, huh? So over my years at BC, really working with people who were either becoming teachers, but much more administrators, education policy people, assessment experts, that type of thing. So it's kind of wonky public policy, especially related to things like funding of schools and vouchers and religiously affiliated schools around legal issues and all that kind of stuff. And when I look back, the number of students that I've taught over the years at BC, I then was a visiting professor at Georgetown. I took a leave from BC, and that was a great experience, especially to be involved with the US Department of Education and the National Catholic Educational Association. One of the great joys of the life of being a professor is directing dissertations. So the number of doctoral students that I mentored, and keeping up with a number of them, that's been a great joy in my life. And in some ways, I think the position that I have now and the position I had as dean, you're kind of not in the front lines in the same way. But as dean, I didn't have the chance to do much teaching and mentoring. But I tried to create the conditions where that could happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what an administrator really does. I have to say, as of this summer, this is the first time, Keith, since 1987 when I have not been affiliated with a university.
Wow.
I mean, higher ed, that's the water I swim in. So that's a little strange. I miss that. And then in my 4 years previous to this, I had a faculty position at Fordham Lincoln Center.
Okay.
And the fascination of working with especially Catholic schools in the tri-state area and lots of international connections to faith-related schools around the world. So yeah, do I miss that? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But then, there are joys to this too. And how do I kind of help create the conditions where that kind of education can take place in our sponsored schools and higher ed institutions?
And I imagine some of your expertise comes in handy. A lot of schools are going to be struggling, I imagine, in the wake of the pandemic. A lot of parishes, nobody knows what it looks like on the other side of this.
Well, it's just I think it was a National Catholic Reporter. 6 schools have just closed in LA. A group of us at Fordham did a study for the Brooklyn Diocese, the most urban diocese in the country. Probably 1/3 of their schools are not sustainable long term. So
Wow.
a lot of these elements existed, but in many ways, the pandemic sped them up.
Yes, it's just exacerbated things.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still here in the Diocese of Worcester. I mean, parishes are still not fully open, so we're still, the obligation to attend Mass is suspended through Pentecost Sunday. So
Right.
again, we don't know what it looks like on the other side yet. So we're kind of,
Yeah, we don't, right?
yeah, we're going to wait and see, I think. But so you talked about your time at the Lynch School. I wonder, when you were there, did you know Vince Rougeot, the president-elect here of Holy Cross?
Sure, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, okay, so Vince, he's a terrific guy. I mean, I'm sure, the way he interviewed, and he's articulate about the mission and identity of a Jesuit Catholic higher ed institution. He also is passionate as an African American coming from Black Louisiana Catholic culture, which is interesting. Actually, not New England. It brings another not only racial perspective but also a geographic perspective. He's extraordinarily competent and also passionate in his writing about social justice and how that's related to faith. And started a center at BC to examine these issues of racism, which, as I travel up and down the East Coast, so many of our places are starting to do that in response to, not that racism is new, but it's been revealed in ways that are very dramatic and call for a serious and significant response. So I can't think of anyone better than Vince to do that. So I was delighted. I spoke to him. I knew in the process, we had a nice conversation. And so, yeah, I think it'll be really good. He's wonderful. Robert, his wife, is a pediatrician. She's terrific. And is it 2 or 3 sons?
I think they have 3.
3, is it? Yeah. So all good things to hope for Holy Cross in the future. And someone who really does take seriously the Catholic Jesuit identity. And that is so much of what makes Holy Cross, Holy Cross.
Yeah. I wonder if you might say a word just about kind of lay leadership. You talked a little bit about your time at the Lynch School. I imagine you were helping to form a lot of lay collaborators, even for Catholic schools. I wonder if you might say something about the importance of this moment in terms of lay leadership.
Sure. I think as you know, on May 20th, we're embarking on this Ignatian year. And as Father Sosa, Father General, has said, it's an opportunity for all of us to deepen our Ignatian identity. And it's especially an opportunity to highlight our lay colleagues who share our mission, but also share our charism. And what I have found traveling virtually, albeit to all of our places, the engagement of lay people on all levels, leadership certainly. Maybe if you look at the 27 Jesuit higher ed institutions now, I think, well, the majority certainly have lay leaders.
Yes.
The exact numbers I don't have off the top of my head. Likewise in our secondary schools. Also, what's been extraordinary is the development of lay spiritual directors, lay people directing the spiritual exercises. The Worcester Diocese, that wonderful program of outreach. So I think that the partnership with lay people, also, of course, I think the particular importance of lay women and also women religious, and that perspective. And as you probably know, Father General, putting together a commission to look at the role of women, sharing our mission and our works. And Donna Andrade from Fairfield is the representative of North America, one of our own here in the province. And so I think the role of women, laymen, other religious, as you know, the 36th General Congregation that took place in October 2016, those of us gathered as delegates there, clearly seeing the need for networking and collaboration as we move ahead. And that is not, Jesuits do that in isolation. We do it with our lay colleagues.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, that's very helpful.
Yeah, and part of it too, my time at BC, and I was in the Lynch School, but a lot of involvement with the Institute of Religious Ed Pastoral Ministry, which then became the School of Theology and Ministry. Lay people in ministry. And Holy Cross has had a long tradition of that.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm very fortunate to work with my lay colleagues here in the chaplain's office, who they've been here. Many have been here a long time and have come to teach me a lot. In the
Sure.
5 years I've been here. I'm doing a thing tomorrow with Adam Rosinski in the Jesuit Vocations Office, and a few of us. He's asked us to talk about Jesuit friendship. And so it's me and Tim O'Brien and Pat Nolan, and we're just going to kind of hop on a call and see what happens.
Sure.
But one of the things that we often talk about, as in my generation, is that we have kind of Jesuit heroes that we look up to. Some who have passed away, but you named one of mine already. Paul Harmon is definitely one of my Jesuit heroes.
Sure.
I wonder who have been some heroes for you in society?
Well, Paul certainly would be, Bob Manning. And I think in terms of shaping my identity as an academician and as a Jesuit in scholarly work, John O'Malley is a huge hero of mine and has had such an important influence. I mean, he directed my licentiate work, that advanced degree in church history, and just the way he thinks and the way he approaches, for example, things like the impact of the Second Vatican Council. And so John clearly has had a huge impact on my life. It's also been a real joy, again, with this account of conscience, of talking to elderly Jesuits whom I have known for many years. And for a number, though, I say at the end of the conversation, you know what, you're like fine wine. You just get better with age. And I've been so impressed by a lot of these guys. And some have had issues and struggles over the years and all that, but have kind of made peace with their life, and I suppose in a lot of ways, it took to talk to them about their prayer life. Many of them describe it as saying, I've kind of said everything I need to say to God, and it's now just to be in God's presence. And I thought, it's like elderly couples I've known in love with each other more than ever, but kind of they don't have to say a whole lot. There's this just being together and familiarity. And so, and again, I could go through the list of names, but there are a number of them. And so sort of note to self, I'm 66 years old, right? Grow old gracefully. And we know what that's like in the society. The positive examples of those who have, and sadly, some negative examples of guys who just live a lot of regret, I also have to say the group that you just described, kind of the younger priests in the province, likewise the scholastics, like the guys in Regency, and people probably know that's between philosophy, theology studies. You guys really like each other. Which is great. And I think too, technology, we've learned a lot about the usefulness of technology. And clearly Jesuit community is people with whom we share a roof, living in the same place. But Jesuit community is broader than that. It's the friendships. And, you know, I often think of the example of Ignatius and Francis Xavier, you know, separated by so many miles, of course, in that, you know, 16th century. So the importance of Jesuit friendships and peer Jesuit friendships. And so I just say, you know, I'm sure Phil Florio, our vocation director, will give me a link, so I'll be able to see what you guys actually say. But part of my role as provincial is to facilitate Jesuit friendships.
Yes. You know, Phil Burrows and I were living outside of the community for
Right.
6 months because we were very worried that the Jesuits were all going to get quarantined. But on Holy Thursday, we moved back because the community has been vaccinated. And so we feel confident now that we're not going to get quarantined. And it was like a homecoming.
Yeah.
You know, because we really have not, we've had some interaction, but we haven't been able to be together. And you've now given us permission in all Jesuit houses to kind of resume more normalcy. We can sit at table together and we don't have to wear masks in the house and masks and things like that. So it's nice to be back in community and to be with my brothers. You know?
Well, there is something to be said for, you know, absence makes the heart grow fonder.
That's right.
And I think, you know, when I look back at this pandemic time, and I think as it passes for all of us, if you will, to do an examine, you know, that reflection upon experience in the light of prayer that is at the heart of the Ignatian way of being, you know, to look back over the past 13, 14 months and to say, you know, we all know where the heartache has been and the difficulties and the death and the loneliness and the isolation, but also to try to look for where were the graces of this time. And for myself, I think I have a deeper appreciation than ever of the people God has put into my life who bring joy and hope and life. And maybe to be more grateful for the people in our lives, and maybe to be more aware, I think for all of us, some soul searching, what is really important and what isn't, and things that seem so crucial. No, you know. So, and I think for us too, you know, the holiday season, normally Jesuits who are no longer in formation, you know, spend time with family and friends at the holidays, and we were kind of quarantined, you know, saying it's sort of like the old song, you know, you can't be with the ones you love the ones you're with. But, and Jesuits who had to be together Christmas and Thanksgiving. But I think also, did we find some new life in community that perhaps we didn't appreciate as much before? And so for anyone listening to this conversation, I would say, you know, in a spirit of prayer, look back at this experience and say, what has God taught us and how has God brought us life in the midst of all the death and suffering?
Yeah, it's an excellent message, I think, as we're emerging from this time. And certainly this episode will be airing during the Easter season. And so it's a good Easter message, I think. Well, Joe, thanks so much for spending time with me today and giving our viewers, our alums and friends a glimpse of what it's like to be a Jesuit, a major superior even. The extended Holy Cross community is a better place with you in it. And I do thank you personally for your great leadership of our province, especially in these very difficult times. So thanks for everything you've done.
Thank you, Keith, and blessings to everyone in the Holy Cross community. I'm grateful for the experience of being part of that community.
Great, thanks, Joe.
God bless.
To our viewers, we're nearing the end of our spring series, so keep an eye out for our next Jesuit profile in the coming weeks. And until then, be well.